At a Senate confirmation hearing for Army Lieutenant General Austin Miller, the nominee discussed military operations in Afghanistan and the prospects for ending the U.S. military mission. If confirmed, General Miller would become commander of U.S. and NATO forces in Afghanistan. The Senate Armed Services Committee hearing is an hour and a half.
The meeting will come to order, and Senator Reid and I talked this over, and we thought before our opening statements we would like to hear the introduction of our witness by Senator Burr. Senator Burr.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Vice Chairman, thank you. And to all of my colleagues, I realize that this is not normal for the committee to have a uniformed individual introduced. But I felt compelled to offer, and General Miller was nice enough to honor me with accepting that. This nominee really needs no introduction because I think for most of you, you have either met him or you've read about his career. But there are a few things that I feel are important to highlight to members. For Senator Reid and myself, we're delighted to see another West Point graduate that really does deserve the attention that this nominee has gotten. I'm not going to cover everything because most of you know it, but not only is he a proud West Point graduate, he served in the 82nd Airborne. He's had multiple combat tours, multiple awards and commendations. My committee, the Intelligence Committee, has worked closely with General Miller since 2016. We became commander of JSOC. And I can tell every member here he has been responsive, thorough, and honest. But what I really wanted to come before you to tell you is that this is a man that has earned the respect of his superiors and his subordinates. Without question, when you go to Fort Bragg today and you talk to those soldiers, regardless of whether they're inside a wire inside Fort Bragg, they all know Lieutenant General Miller. He has earned the respect of his troops. He's done it from the time he left West Point. He's performed in a commanding role in some of the most difficult situations in the world, and he has been deployed into a combat zone multiple times. Our soldiers are taught to follow leaders, and there's a reason that the troops under him follow him. Scott Miller is a tremendous leader. He is the right man at the right time to carry out a difficult mission in Afghanistan. His intellect, his honesty, and his intelligence and his experience make him the appropriate choice. So I hope that this committee will act expeditiously on his nomination. But I will end in this. He's a great father, and he's a great man. This is the full package of everything we look for when we look at somebody that we want to put that star on their shoulder and ask them to represent our kids and our grandchildren's future. I thank you for the opportunity to be here. I hope and I pray that we can do this as expeditiously as possible. I thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Burr. That's an excellent introduction, and you're welcome to stay and come up here at the table if you'd like for this, or you can be relieved.
Mr. Chairman, I think I'll go back to the padded room with no windows.
Yeah, all right.
Thank you.
That's good. Thank you, Senator Burr. The committee meets today to review the nomination of the next commander for both the U.S. forces, Afghanistan, and NATO Resolute Support Mission. We welcome Lieutenant General Austin Scott Miller, commander of the Joint Special Operations Command. In order to exercise its legislative oversight responsibilities, it's important that the committee and other appropriate committees of Congress are able to receive testimony and briefings. Please answer the following questions. These are the required questions. Just answer yes or no audibly, if you would, please. Have you adhered to applicable laws and regulations governing conflicts of interest?
I have, Senator.
Do you agree when asked to give your personal views, even if those views differ from the administration in power?
I do, Senator.
Have you assumed any duties or undertaken any actions which would appear to presume the outcome of the confirmation process?
I have not, Senator.
Will you ensure your staff complies with deadlines established for requested communications, including questions for the record in hearings?
I will, Senator.
Will you cooperate in providing witnesses and briefers in response to congressional requests?
I will, Senator.
Will those witnesses be protected from reprisal for their testimony or briefings?
Yes, sir, they will.
Do you agree, if confirmed, to appear and testify upon request before this committee?
I do, Senator.
And do you agree to provide documents, including copies of electric forms of communications in a timely manner when requested by a duly constituted committee, or to consult with the committee regarding the basis of any good faith delay or denial in providing such documents?
I do, Senator.
General Miller, we're grateful for your decades of service to our country and your leadership, and I have to say I agree with the comments of Senator Burr. I think he described you very well. You've been nominated to lead the forces fighting our nation's longest war. We look forward to hearing your views. This is really a significant post. Since 2001, U.S. forces have battled terrorist groups to secure our nation from attack and ensure Afghanistan is never again a terrorist safe haven. In that time, we have decimated al-Qaeda and driven the Taliban from power, providing the opportunity for a freely elected Afghan government to take root and grow. And yet, major challenges remain. As the Taliban insurgency spreads violence and chaos around the country, and new groups like ISIS-K are terrorizing the Afghan people, the administration's South Asia strategy re-emphasized America's commitment to Afghanistan and reversed the previous administration's policy of announcing a timeline for withdrawal. I was just in Afghanistan visiting our troops and General Nicholson last month. After speaking with him, it's clear that we have made progress under the new approach. Still, we need to remain clear-eyed about Pakistan's continued support for the Taliban insurgency. General Miller, you are uniquely qualified to lead the renewal effort in Afghanistan with your service in Special Ops and your most recent assignment as the commander of the Joint Special Operations Command. This committee looks forward to hearing how you would address the challenges that you face today. Senator Reid.
Thank you very much, Senator Inhofe. And let me join you in welcoming General Miller, as well as his daughter Sarah and son Austin, who has just joined the 82nd. Thank you both for your commitment and service and support of your father. General, thank you for your continued service to the nation, and thank also, as I said, your family for their tremendous support. And as Senator Burr indicated, we do have things in common. We were both runts at West Point who became grunts, and so I appreciate your service very much. Much of your career has involved the mission in Afghanistan. In addition to several deployments, you served as the commander of the Combined Forces Special Operations Component Command in Afghanistan and as the director of the Pakistan-Afghanistan Coordination Center on the Joint Staff. General Miller, if confirmed, you will take command at a critical time. It has been nearly 10 months since the President's South Asia strategy was announced. In support of the strategy, the administration has increased the number of U.S. troops on the ground, primarily to advise and enable the Afghan security forces, made adjustments to the rules of engagement, and sought to keep pressure on the Taliban throughout the winter months. Despite these changes, the lead Inspector General for Overseas Contingency Operations recently reported that Available metrics showed few signs of progress, and the intelligence community assesses that the overall situation in Afghanistan will probably deteriorate modestly this year due to persistent political instability, sustained attacks by the Taliban-led insurgency, unsteady Afghan National Security Forces performance, and chronic financial shortfalls. General Miller, I'm interested in your thoughts on the security situation in Afghanistan, particularly how we ensure we are making measurable progress in our efforts to train, advise, and assist the Afghan security forces. In addition to the advisory mission in Afghanistan, our forces are engaged in a counterterrorism operation against foreign terrorist organizations, namely al-Qaeda and the ISIS Khorasan group. Despite concerted efforts to disrupt and destroy these networks, these groups remain resilient and have retained the ability to conduct high-profile attacks against innocent civilians throughout the country. I look forward to your assessment of the threats emanating from Afghanistan and Pakistan and your expectations for the counterterrorism mission under your command. Though the security projections for 2018 are pessimistic, there are a few notable bright spots that also bear highlighting. The Afghan security forces continue to employ their most effective fighting units, specifically the Special Operations and Air Forces, and are committed to the effort to recruit and train additional forces in both categories. Over the recent Eid holiday, the Afghan government and the Taliban completed a successful 3-day ceasefire, the first national-level ceasefire the Taliban has agreed to since 2001. Additionally, grassroots-level peace efforts, including peace marches and sit-ins, has spread to over half the provinces of Afghanistan over the past few months. We have heard from the administration that the South Asia strategy is integrated and whole of government. However, many questions remain regarding the way in which progress on the battlefield will be translated into progress towards a political solution. Absent a diplomatic effort that is empowered with appropriate resources and staffing to engage with Afghan counterparts and critical regional players, any security gains will be fleeting. General Miller, these are just a few of the challenges you will confront if confirmed. Again, I thank you for your willingness to serve in this critical position. And as reflected by many people I know in the military, you're one of the most extraordinary general officers that we have in the uniform of the United States. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Reid. General Miller, it will be anxious to hear your opening statement. You can take whatever time you'd like. However, your entire statement will be made a part of the record. You might start off by introducing your family, and you are recognized.
Senator, thank you for that. And I will recognize the family, of course. I would like to thank Senator Burr for that humbling introduction. Senator Inhofe, Ranking Member Reid, and distinguished members of the committee, it's a privilege to appear before you today. I appreciate the opportunity to answer your questions regarding my nomination as Commander Resolute Support in U.S. Forces Afghanistan. And I know we all feel the absence of Senator McCain today, a true American hero. I'd also like to thank the President, Secretary Mattis, and Chairman Dunford for their trust in me. They've placed in me with this nomination. If confirmed, it'd be my honor to follow my friend, General Mick Nicholson, who has done an outstanding job in this critical position. Both my children and my sister's family are here with me today. My son, Lieutenant Austin Miller, currently serving with the 82nd Airborne Division.
And how long has he been in this position?
Senator, he's been in the position about 4 months now.
Okay.
He's not tenured quite yet, a little bit more to go. And my daughter, Sarah, who just recently graduated from Fordham this past May, and who's intending to pursue a career in law. I'm proud of both of them and honored to have them with me here today. Before I go on, I'd like to thank the soldiers, the sailors, the airmen, the Marines, and civil servants whom I've had the honor to serve. Their selfless service to our country and to each other is a testament of the strength of our department and our nation. Most importantly, I want to remember and honor those who have fallen. They and their families have made the ultimate sacrifice. I also want to recognize our Afghan and coalition partners. 39 countries recognize the common threat posed by ISIS and al-Qaeda. We fight together today against a common enemy to keep our country safe, and if confirmed, it will be my privilege to fight alongside them again. I've learned a lot in the last 17 years. I've learned there are groups that want nothing more than to harm Americans. I've learned these groups thrive in ungoverned spaces. And I've also learned when we maintain pressure on them abroad, they struggle to organize and build the necessary means to attack us. I understand our core goal in Afghanistan is to ensure terrorists can never again use Afghanistan as a safe haven to threaten the United States or other members of the international community. I believe military pressure is necessary to create the conditions for political reconciliation. As we enable the Afghans to build military capacity, they are better able to deny safe haven to terrorists. I know and appreciate the tremendous cost committed to this mission. If confirmed, I'll be a vigorous steward of the people, the resources I'm entrusted with. Corruption and incompetence are corrosive to our mission, and fighting them will always be a constant component of this. Is only one aspect of the administration's condition-based strategy in Afghanistan and South Asia. It's necessary to provide space for political progress. If confirmed, I look forward to working alongside my friend, Ambassador John Bass, and other intergovernmental partners. His experience in those trusted relationships will be vital to our shared mission. I've had the honor of serving more than 20 years of my career in special operations. I know the values of working with reliable partners. I've learned problems are best addressed by seeking insights and advice from a wide pool of talent, not just those in uniform, but those throughout our government, as well as our international partners. And I've learned to maximize the resources I've been entrusted with to achieve effects. I've seen firsthand the terrorist threats coming from Afghanistan, and I know what's at stake. If confirmed, it would be my distinct honor to serve in this position. Thank you for the opportunity. Sir, I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, General Miller. Our two core military missions in Afghanistan are counterterrorism and to train, advise, and assist the Afghan security forces. The administration released the South Asia strategy, reemphasizing America's commitment to Afghanistan and bolstering American security. The strategy is conditions-based and reversed the previous administration's policy of artificial timelines for withdrawal, and it made changes to the rules of engagement, including those of use of air power to strike enemy targets throughout the country. This new rules of engagement has allowed for targeting of illicit narcotics and severely hampered the flow of funding and is impacting the Taliban. Currently, there are approximately 16,000 U.S. personnel serving in the country. Both General Nicholson and Ambassador Bass, who recently appeared before this committee, have said that the new strategy is impacting the Taliban on multiple fronts. In the past, the Taliban simply had to sit back and wait us out. With this new strategy, I'd like to have, in your view, has that changed the thinking of the Taliban? And if so, how?
Senator, I go back to the, as you mentioned, the vital national interest. It is the counterterrorism piece. Certainly the Taliban create the conditions for the ungoverned spaces. As far as the changing of the thinking of the Taliban, I'm following the progress from a distance. If confirmed, that would be something that I would go over and make an assessment. I do note, as highlighted earlier, the recent ceasefire over Eid, one by the government and one by the Taliban. So if nothing else, we have seen some change from that regard. But clearly, from the conditions-based strategy, is taking time off the table for at the present.
Okay, what about resources? You've had a chance to look and see what the resources available to carry out your mission. What's your response in terms of, are they adequate as far as you see right now?
Senator, where I sit today in Joint Special Operations Command, it gives me a unique look at certainly the resources that are applied against the counterterrorist fight. So I do see those. As for other resources, my instincts say they're about right. But at the same time, I would, if confirmed, I'd like to go over and just look at that and come back to you with a better assessment of that.
Yeah, it'll take some time to get used to where we are. Just for a minute, let's talk about the SFAB activities that are going on. We have some 6. I guess one of those is to the reserves. So we're looking at 5 FSABs, which concentrate on the NCOs and the officers, that they have, the Afghans have adequate resources to carry out missions as instructed and participated in by these officers and NCOs. How do you think that's going to work? And do you see the cooperation of the Afghans at this time to be adequate to carry out those missions?
Senator, I've seen the SFABs only from a distance. I had an opportunity to meet with their commander. I do know that's very high quality soldiers, officers, and non-commissioned officers as part of the SFAB. What I'd go back to is my personal experience with advising and assisting, which, as you mentioned, is a critical component of our train, advise, and assist. I've seen it work. I've seen it work with the Afghan Special Security Forces, primarily with the commandos, but also with the police. That combination is a powerful combination, and it has a chance to increase their capabilities, their reach from an intelligence and the Afghans' reach in intelligence and operations. So I'm confident that this is going in the right direction.
Well, that's good, and I'm confident that you're going to be confirmed too. So I'd just like to have you, once you're on the job and looking to see how this works. It is a concept. It's good, I think, and but it hasn't had time to be proven to the extent that in the environment you're going to be working in. So we'll need to have report backs on that.
Yes, Senator.
Thank you so much, Senator Reid.
Oh, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. General Miller. Again, I shared the Chairman's confidence in your skill and your ability and your leadership. The military efforts are designed to be the forcing process for diplomatic and political issues. I mean, ultimately, that's what's going to resolve the situation. There's an election that is pending in Afghanistan, political reconciliation. The ceasefire at Eid was a good sign, but I think a very transitory sign. You will be part of a team, but one of the things that I just want to ask you about is that we had previously a special representative for Afghanistan and Pakistan. That's been eliminated. So who's the lead beyond the ambassador in Afghanistan? Who's the lead diplomat that's going to work with you and the ambassador to get this political situation in hand?
Sir, today I'm tracking that Ambassador Alice Wells is the lead, working very specifically in the reconciliation arena for State Department.
I just said she is the acting Assistant Secretary for South and Central Asia, and she has a range of tasks, but she's not, she could be there or not there in the next few months or weeks. Again, I think we, together with military leadership that's consistent and very capable, we need diplomatic leadership too, and that message I hope you will carry back. The other area of concern immediately outside of Afghanistan is Pakistan. Can you give us a sense now from your great experience in the region as to where we are with regard to Pakistan and how effective they will be in assisting our efforts?
Senator, as I look at Afghanistan, and I've looked at it for quite a number of years, it's obviously a very tough neighborhood with some tough neighbors. As I look at Pakistan, Pakistan must be part of the solution, and we should have high expectations that they are part of the solution, not just diplomatically, but from a security standpoint as well.
Do you think they are part of the solution yet? They seem to be contradictory in what they do.
Senator, again, I see similar behavior, contradictory, but as we go forward, as we work through the South Asia strategy, not just from a military standpoint, but from a diplomatic standpoint, again, I go back to, I believe we ought to have very, very high expectations of them.
With respect to the military forces of Afghanistan, their special operations troops have done remarkably well, and they're very well trained. You are trying to increase the number of special operations troops as well as the Air Force. Do you see those as the two key elements of power that the Afghan government can wield to if not win, at least to push back Taliban?
Senator, I do, and if confirmed, I'd like to go forward, take some time to make an assessment. I have personal experience with the ground forces, limited experience with the air forces, but that'd be an area I'd like to assess and report back.
With respect to our operations in Afghanistan, there was a great deal more of transparency with respect to the effect of our operations. So recently we were releasing data about airstrikes, targets, and any collateral damage. We still do that CENTCOM overall with respect to operations in Iraq and Syria. But within that Afghan command, we've stopped that with the notion that this is revealing too much information to our opponents. What's your view on the detail of information that should be released?
Senator, if confirmed, first off, I am committed to being very transparent with this committee as required. As for details that are being on hold, I would need to go forward and understand why we're holding back that information.
Thank you. Again, good luck, sir. And thank you for your service, and thank you for Austin's service. And thank you for Sarah's service, too.
Thank you, Senator Reid. Senator Wicker.
General, thank you for your service. We're eager to get reports about how things are going over there, so we're at a little disadvantage in doing so because you haven't actually been over there in this new capacity. But let me ask you your assessment of this Eid's ceasefire that you mentioned. It was supposed to last 3 days, and the Afghan government then agreed to a unilateral 10-day extension. This was widely criticized in some sectors of Afghanistan. Some members of parliament had some critical things to say about that. And there are reports in Reuters that this led to Taliban fighters walking freely into government-controlled areas. So can you enlighten us a little more based on what you've heard about how this worked and whether the 10-day unilateral extension might have been a disadvantage for the government?
Senator, as I look at this, first and foremost, anything that lowers the violence for any period of time is a positive. There's goodness that comes out of there. It means people are talking. And this campaign will not be resolved by military means alone. Even as we disrupt the threats to our nation, there has to be a political component, political realignment that takes place here. As I'm working off of open source reporting as well, I understand we've just started the 10-day period, and what I'll be looking forward trying to understand is what are the violence levels? Do the violence levels spike, or do they stay at a lower historical period over the next 10 days while the government is in a self-declared ceasefire?
Okay. Well, when you came by my office the other day, and I appreciate that visit, I told you I might ask you about MRAPs. And I don't know if you've had a chance to look into this, but I think we can both agree that MRAPs provide more protection to ground forces than the lighter-skinned Humvees. We agree on that, do we not?
Sir, we agree.
Yes, and also it has come to my attention that Afghans have requested approximately 730 MRAPs, and that we actually, the United States actually has hundreds of excess MRAPs and mothballs that are ready for refurbishment. Have you had a chance in the days since you dropped by the office and in today's hearing to look further into that, and can you comment for us?
Sir, my comments would be just I did look into it, and what I found out is the Afghans do have a number of MRAPs. What I don't know, and would have to wait until, if confirmed, to go forward and look at it to see how they're utilizing them, how they're maintaining them, and what is the long-term sustainability of those. But that would be something I. So
you found out that they do have a number of them. Were you able to confirm that instead of the 730 that they requested, that they are having to use the lighter-skinned Humvees instead?
Senator, I don't have that information. Again, I am aware that they have been issued a number of armored vehicles to include MRAPs, and that'd be one. I think I can come, if okay with you, come back to you and get you the exact facts on that. Okay, and let me just ask you then, in closing, to react to a statement that Senator Reid made about the lack of progress over the last several months in terms of our effort.
Is that your assessment also, that our progress has been somewhat flat, hadn't gone backwards, but we're not really getting where we need to be?
Senator, I've seen the CGAR reporting as well as the Resolute support as well, and the State Department reporting, and there's a difference of opinion there. As we look at progress, first and foremost, I go back to the core objective, and that is Al-Qaeda, ISIS, preventing sanctuary, preventing external operations. So there's progress there. As it relates to advising and assisting the Afghans to harden fill in some of that space with the against the Taliban, I would need to go forward and make an assessment of where we stand there.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Senator Wicker. Senator Peters.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and General Miller. Again, thank you for your long career of service to our country. General Miller, when President Trump announced his strategy for Afghanistan last August, he made clear that the U.S. military would be taking a goal-oriented approach and moving away from timetables, as I know you're well aware. The President said that conditions on the ground, not arbitrary timetables, will guide our strategy. But I'm concerned that for too long, we haven't clarified what our metrics are for success in Afghanistan. And as a result, we've allowed our strategy to drift over the years. When we do have metrics, I think it's questionable whether or not we're achieving those. The previous question, you weren't sure whether or not we were drifting backwards or there were some other opinions we're moving forward. So it's somewhat of a debate. So it's one thing not to let our enemies know our plans. I get that. I think we all get that. But I don't think it's an excuse to not make some tough decisions about our national security. And as you can imagine, my constituents ask me what as our return on investment has been in Afghanistan. It's a common question that I get, in fact, at town halls that I hold, is why are we investing in infrastructure in Afghanistan when we have significant needs right here in the United States. It's important to remember that over $125 billion has been spent on relief and reconstruction alone in Afghanistan. That is more than what the United States spent on the Marshall Plan to rebuild Western Europe after World War II when accounting for inflation. So I know our general objective has been to set up an Afghan government capable of running their own country and providing security necessary to not allow terrorist operations. But after spending more than we did to set up Europe after the devastating effects of World War II, and 17 years have elapsed, tell me what you think we need to be doing differently that we haven't done for the past 17 years.
Senator, acknowledge 17 years is a very long time. And as I look at the strategy today, I'm very focused on what our vital national interest is identified in that strategy, which is a threat to U.S. citizens, international partners that emanate from Afghanistan. Very specifically, ISIS and Al-Qaeda. Overall objective, certainly the ways involve from a military component of this strategy, a train, advise, and assist of Afghan forces, that's Army and police, that are able to then secure their own areas, secure these areas so that it lightens our touch. And lastly, work towards a political solution here, and whether it's reconciliation or political realignment that does take place. My experience, I've watched this war with high troop levels. I was present during the surge of 130,000. I know we've reduced costs over time by bringing the force levels down as well as the resources for the mission.
General, you talked about cost and spending. I serve as the ranking member on the Federal Spending Oversight Subcommittee, and last month we had a hearing on spending in Afghanistan. We heard testimony from the Special Inspector General that spending of over $8 billion on counter-narcotics programming, and basically after $8 billion of hard-earned taxpayer money, those programs has been decided just didn't work because they weren't coordinated, they were poorly executed. We've also heard that the incentives for narcotics production and conflict dynamics just overwhelm anything that the United States can do with these assistance programs, meaning it's questionable if these programs were wise investments in the first place, But certainly at some point after spending $8 billion, someone should have spoken up. Now, I know that's not your fault. You weren't there. This is not about anything that you did in your role. But I'd like to hear from you and have some assurances that you will do things differently, particularly when it comes to maintaining accountability for hard-earned money that's being spent in Afghanistan, to make sure that it is actually spent wisely and it is having an impact based on objective metrics. How do you plan on doing that?
Senator, first of all, in my present duty and previous command positions, I view myself as personally responsible, a good steward for the taxpayer, for the resources that are allocated. And I thank this committee very specifically for the support given over the years. As I look, if confirmed, and I move forward, I take that same mantra forward with me. That doesn't, that goes there. Fraud, waste, and abuse cannot be tolerated. Corruption cannot be tolerated. Accountability has to be established. Working with CGAR, working with other auditing agencies to ensure that we understand where money is flowing, where it's useful, and where it's flowing where it's unuseful.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Peters. Senator Ernst.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. General Miller, thank you. It was a pleasure meeting with you last week. I appreciate your insight very much. And I would like to thank your family as well for being here today. Lieutenant Miller, Sarah, thank you for joining us, and thank you for supporting your father. General, last year there was a very realistic chance that all U.S. forces were going to be withdrawn from Afghanistan. Can you briefly paint a picture of how Afghanistan would look today if that had occurred?
Senator, my personal opinion is that, but I think echoed by others in the intel community, is a precipitous and disorderly withdrawal would have had we would have had negative effects on protecting our vital national interests, which is protect from attacks emanating from Afghanistan.
So you do agree, sir, that at some point we do need to find our way out of Afghanistan, but it needs to be done in a methodical order. Is that correct?
That's correct, Senator.
Okay, thank you very much. You shared some very wise words with me last week, and you had stated the Afghan military and government must want to win more than us. Can you best explain how we work with the Afghans to make that happen?
Senator, what I was referring to, I've worked in Afghanistan with Afghan partners. Not the wider Army, but very specifically the Special Security Forces. And I know they can fight. I know they fight and they can win. As we go forward on what must be a sustainable effort, my look on this is, if confirmed, is you put money where you know you'll have results. And that speaks to not only on the military side, but any other activities that are taking place.
And we also spoke a little bit about counter-drug operations and going after narco-terrorists in Afghanistan. That's very important. As you know, it's vital that we do cut the terrorist funding streams, and just as important is that we stop the production of those narcotics in Afghanistan. Unfortunately, we're often using millions of dollars in bombs. And putting troops in very dangerous situations to have very little impact on the actual drug revenue. So how do you intend to quantify our counter-drug campaign, and what will you do, and how will you view that as success?
Senator, the military is certainly a supporting arm to any counter-narcotics, counter-drug strategy. From a military perspective, as we look at the insurgency, very much focus on revenues, which, as you indicated, the opium trade does provide revenues for Taliban, and actually likely fuels corruption, as well as other bad actors. The military focus today is focused counter-threat finance, focusing on the finances. How do you reduce the finance streams, which does include narcotics, but also includes other illicit traffic, whether it be mining or taxation that takes place. And with any insurgency, you have to go after the finances.
Thank you. Of course, we have to do that. I have a little bit of time left, but we do talk a lot about our troop numbers in Afghanistan, and we don't talk enough about all of the air assets and the needs that come with them. Of course, we have to have the support force too. As you know, close air support, medevac platforms, and lift capabilities are equally as important. And do you have any plans now to increase air assets in Afghanistan?
Senator, if confirmed, that'd be a place I would want to take a look. Agree with the size of the country and the place we need to be. Air assets are absolutely critical.
Thank you. I do want to give a shout out to our Iowa National Guard air assets that are serving in Afghanistan right now. The medevac company, when I visited them last November, they had just been in country a few weeks, and they had done numerous evacuations and one mass casualty evac. So I appreciate that very much. I don't have much time remaining. I'll get questions to you. I do have a few other questions, but I want to echo Senator Burr's sentiments that I do think you are well qualified. I look forward to having you confirmed quickly through the Armed Services Committee and on the floor of the Senate. My best wishes to you, General Miller. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator Ernst. Senator Warren.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And General Miller, thank you for being here, and thank you for your willingness to take on this very, very difficult assignment. You have been nominated to be the 17th commander of NATO's Afghanistan mission. Since 2007, you'd be the 9th U.S. commander in the same mission. So you come from what is now a very long line of military leaders who acknowledge the real challenges, but ultimately remain faithful to the idea that our strategy is working. Unfortunately, you are not the first commander to come in here to express cautious optimism. In fact, I just started looking through some of the old documents. General Campbell said, I really do think that as people look back and as they say 2010 was the year in Afghanistan, I think that was a turning point. Secretary Panetta, 2011 was a real turning point. It was the first time in 5 years that we saw a drop in the number of enemy attacks. General Dempsey in 2014, the election seems to be a turning point in the confidence of the Afghanistan security forces. General Nicholson in 2017, U.S. and Afghan forces have turned the corner. General Miller, we supposedly turned the corner so many times that it seems now we're going in circles. So let me just ask you, do you envision turning another corner during your tenure as commander? After 17 years of war, what are you going to do differently to bring this conflict to an end?
Senator, first off, I acknowledge the 17 years. That's generational. And I have experience from 2001 until very recently. This young guy sitting behind me, I never anticipated that his cohort would be in a position to deploy as I sat there in 2001 and looked at that. So I acknowledge that. I also, I can't guarantee you a timeline or an end date. I know that going into this position or offer necessarily a turning point, unless there is one. Unless there's something to come back and report back that something has changed. And that's where I anticipate being. I go back to the vital national interest of the United States of America. And I do know that I do know today from personal, because of our forces there, I know that that is having an effect on elements that would attack the United States of America. It's disrupting. The other piece is, can we harden the Afghan security forces to close the distance and change the calculus on the ground now?
Well, I appreciate that, General, but let me just push back just a little bit on this. Afghanistan is in crisis. The government is not gaining new territory. It lacks the support of its own people. It controls or influences only about 2/3 of the population. The Taliban has actually increased the population under its control since 2016. The security forces are sustaining unsustainable losses. According to UNICEF, nearly 50% of Afghan children are out of school. Food insecurity has spiked. Corruption is rampant. Let me see if I can frame the question differently. Even if U.S. forces could somehow stabilize the security situation, can we realistically expect a political settlement without addressing these underlying challenges?
Senator, from the military component, as we support the political speaks quite a lot to the reconciliation, the aspects of bringing the Afghans back together, and some of those underlying challenges will also have to be addressed.
None of this is the fault of the brave men and women of the U.S. military, but I am afraid that we are asking our military to perform an impossible task. We've been in Afghanistan for 17 years. Our military cannot and should not be in Afghanistan forever. We need to make it clear to the Afghans that they need to secure enough of their own country so that U.S. troops can come home as soon as possible. I appreciate your being here, but I'm deeply concerned that we are just heading further and further down a path that does not have success at the end. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Warren. Senator Perdue.
Thank you, General, for your service and your family's service. I share the concern of the senator, but let me ask you a question. So we've been there a long time. You've been there. A lot of people have died there. It seems to me that the real question here is, are we going to get the security forces of Afghanistan hardened, as you call it, enough to stand on their own, to where we can downsize our involvement there with some security that they'll be able to withstand the Taliban onslaught? Would you agree with that?
I do, Senator.
And so we've given them air power over the last year. We trained their A-29 pilots in this country. We've given them a lot of support. And yet when we cross the border into Pakistan, we see nothing's really changed much in the last year. I was in Pakistan last year with Senator McCain, and we met with General Bajwa. We met with the head of their intelligence service, and then we went over and met with President Ghani the next day in Afghanistan and talked about cross-border joint operations. And to your knowledge right now, from open source and from your special operations background, have any of those joint operations actually been conducted yet?
Senator, I think, from my knowledge, there's been joint cooperation, but not joint operations back and forth across each other's borders.
So the solution here, it seems to me, having had some personal experience in that region over the last 30 years, that the Pashtun problem, of which Haqqani and the Taliban are among the many tribes, is part of the problem and part of the potential solution. But right now, with the Haqqani network being protected inside Pakistan, do you see any relief for this cross-border safe haven that the Taliban now continue to enjoy?
Senator, that would be something I'd have to go look at if confirmed. I go back to what I think our larger expectations of Pakistan ought to be is we ought to have high expectations of them to address the issues you're speaking about there.
So last year when I visited General Nicholson over there, the objective as he laid it out and the plan for victory, as he called it, and I have high regard for General Nicholson, I think he's done a great job there, was to get the Taliban to the table. Are we any closer to that today, in your opinion, than we were a year ago? And what would you do as the new commander over there to help achieve that mission, if that continues to be our objective?
Senator, I'm not aware, and that's again just because I'm not on the inside of getting them to the table, what that discussions that are taking place. The military strategy directly in support of the political objectives is in play. I see that shoring itself up from a distance, and if confirmed, I look forward to continuing that.
Sir, one last question briefly. Last week we had, just last Friday as a matter of fact, we had a report that the head of the Pakistani Taliban was actually killed in a U.S. airstrike. I think you may have seen that report, Mullah Fazlallah. But it heightens the opportunity that these guys have to go cross borders. But these high-value targets like that, are they effective in terms of reducing the strength and the power of the Taliban and their ability to keep the government off balance and to continue this turmoil that we talk about in Afghanistan?
Yeah. Senator, as leadership, as you look at a CT strategy as part of a larger campaign, certainly leadership strikes are a pillar there. They're not decisive by themselves. It takes a much deeper disruption of a network, and as importantly, the political aspect to come in and solidify that, take a disrupt and make it into a consolidation of gains.
Sir, it seems to me that one of the things that we do most harmful here in the United States Senate is to pass a continuing resolution that ties your hands from a finance point of view. What can we do besides eliminating the use of continuing resolutions to help you be successful in your mission as a new commander over there?
Senator, first of all, I'd like to thank you, this committee very specifically, but Congress in general for the support over the years. And I think I take that question, look at things on the ground if confirmed, and come back with specific areas of support.
I'll look forward to that answer when I visit you over there. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Senator Perdue. Senator Blumenthal.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I join my colleagues in thanking you and your family for your service and expressing my appreciation for your very candid visit with me recently. When I asked you the question about what the end game is in Afghanistan, you very articulately made the point that we need to protect our nation and our national security from the use of that part of the world, and specifically Afghanistan, as a safe haven for terrorists to attack us. And perhaps for this committee and, in a sense, for the American people, you could express that view, because I think it would help, in a sense, further the understanding among members of this body and the American people about what our goals are there.
As Senator, thank you for that. And they very clearly stated, this is about protecting U.S. citizens. When you go right to the heart of the issue, U.S. citizens, other international partners are threatened by terrorism that emanates from Afghanistan. I look at these groups with my current capacity. Today I'm thinking about Afghanistan, but I look at them across the globe and in these two groups. And very specifically, it's transnational capabilities that allow it to project power. That is the interest that we're protecting. It's not enough just to disrupt. It does require the political levers that come in. It does require work by the Afghans as well. The Afghans are part of this solution. The peace process, it's Afghan-led, Afghan-owned, and those are the components that need to come together here to achieve our core objective.
How significant in that peace process do you think the recent ceasefire was?
Senator, I think that I'm a fan of any time you can lower violence, that gives you a chance to talk. Specifically in Afghanistan, my experience, as long as you're talking, they're probably not shooting at you, and that's a good place to be there. But I don't want to overstate it. I think it starts a conversation. I think there's what really matter here now is the follow-through, certainly by the Afghans, the Taliban, but also the international community and the coalition.
Speaking of that coalition in general, it's a coalition that involves our European allies, correct?
There are some of our European allies, yes, Senator.
And they have shed blood and made sacrifices side by side with us.
That's correct, Senator.
Would you say that our national interest is well served by maintaining the close ties and friendships and alliances that we have with our European partners?
Senator, I agree with that, and I see that, if confirmed, that's one of my key responsibilities, is maintaining the cohesion of the coalition.
And it's hard to compartmentalize those alliances and friendships to the battlefield. They really extend to a variety of other areas and spaces where we share common interests and where we should be cooperating and expressing the ties that have bound us for literally decades and centuries, and in other wars where we have shed blood and made sacrifices together. I feel very strongly that we need to be mindful about those alliances, and your service and the coalition that you will lead, I think, is better served by keeping our allies and our friends close rather than alienating them. I don't know whether you agree.
Senator, I agree, and if confirmed, you have the utmost confidence will be key for me to maintain the coalition or the cohesion of that coalition.
I assume also that you believe that Pakistan, as some of my colleagues have mentioned, has to be part of this overall solution as well.
Senator, I do, and just go a little further, I think the neighbors in the region, which speaks to the regionalization of the strategy, have a responsibility and an interest in a stable Afghanistan.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Blumenthal. Senator Graham.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. General, how many years have you spent in Afghanistan since 9/11?
Senator, I'm counting 3.5 to 4 years.
Okay, so you understand the area pretty well?
Senator, the more I stay there, sometimes the more difficult it becomes to understand. I think I recognize what I don't understand at this stage of my career.
Have you been wounded twice?
I have, Senator.
Where were you wounded at?
Senator, is first in Mogadishu in 1993, and then follow on 10 years later in Iraq.
Okay. As the one, General Nicholson's done a superb job. I just want to thank him and his family for their contribution. I think you're a worthy successor. We have a conditions-based withdrawal policy, is that correct?
That's correct, Senator.
Did you support sending more forces to Afghanistan? The current number, do you support the current number?
I do, Senator.
Do you think
but I would actually, if confirmed, like to, look at it on the ground. Would
you tell us if you thought you needed more?
I would, Senator.
What would happen if we withdrew in 6 months?
Senator, I think a disorderly and precipitous withdrawal would have negative effects on U.S. national security.
Describe those effects briefly.
Senator, I would be concerned about about ISIS and al-Qaeda's ability to emerge and project external operations, one, because I know they want to, and I know they're constantly looking for that opportunity.
Do you think it'd be any different than Iraq when we left too soon?
Senator, from my viewpoint, I think it would be similar.
Okay, in terms of the rise of ISIS and other radical Islamic groups, do we have a plan to deal with them?
Senator, I do. I do think we have a plan.
Do you have the authorities to engage the enemy?
Senator, and especially in my current job, I have the authorities to engage the enemy.
When did that change?
Senator, in the 2016 timeframe discussion, and a lot of this was lowering of authorities as opposed to creating new authorities. It was bringing them down to a lower level.
What's your biggest challenge in Afghanistan as you see it?
Senator, I look at as I look at Afghanistan, biggest challenges, neighbors. Again, they bring in that neighborhood to a place where they're helpful. Certainly the security situation is something, bringing violence down is a continuing challenge and continuing to advise and assist. But I go back to the most important thing we're doing is disrupting the terrorist threat that emanates from Afghanistan.
In the last year, has Pakistan got better or worse or about the same when it comes to helping our efforts in Afghanistan?
Senator, I don't know the answer fully to that question. My assessment is that they need to be. We should have high expectations of them, but I'm not able to judge the better or worse at this stage.
So we've been there a long time. Do you agree with me that history will judge not when we left, but what we left behind?
I do, Senator.
Do you believe it's possible to leave a secure and stable Afghanistan behind one day?
I do, Senator.
What does winning look like?
Senator, I would describe winning first and foremost, protecting, safeguarding U.S. vital national interests, as long as they remain those interests. I would see I've described it previously as a hardened Afghanistan security force, but I guess more detail would be a security force that I know does exist out there with capability to take care of these threats and project their not only their security but their governance, and then ultimately it's a political reconciliation or realignment.
What does losing look like from an American point of view?
Senator, I would see an attack that catastrophic attack against the United States or our allies as that'd be a negative.
How likely is that if we leave too soon?
Senator, my opinion is if we leave too soon, this is a threat. There is a threat in Afghanistan.
A real threat?
Yes, Senator, a real threat.
Thank you very much for your service and good luck.
Thank you, Senator Graham. Senator King.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to follow up on Senator Graham's usual good questions. The question I'm struggling with is that the fundamental premise of our presence in Afghanistan now for 17 years is the safe haven argument, that Afghanistan is a safe haven. It was a safe haven for al-Qaeda at the time of September 11th. The question is, what makes Afghanistan so peculiarly safe as opposed to Pakistan, Iran, Iraq, Africa, Syria? I'm genuinely trying to understand why all the blood and treasure goes into one country if the enemy can simply set up a tent city in the middle of the Sahel or somewhere in Pakistan or somewhere in Iran. Do you see where I'm going? Why is it Afghanistan is the center? You're talking about a mobile enemy. Most of the people that plotted September 11th weren't from Afghanistan. They just used the land. Help me out here.
Senator, with Afghanistan, obviously an ungoverned space, not the only ungoverned space, and not the only place, very specifically, that ISIS and al-Qaeda operate from. There are other locations as well. In Afghanistan, as we discuss it today, one of the unique pieces is Afghanistan still has a government, a functioning government. So it's I would go to that direction. Al-Qaeda, ISIS, dangerous in Afghanistan, transnational in nature, communicating outside of the conflict zone, and not dissimilar to other places around the world, which my particular command, where able, attempts to address those threats as well.
Well, I understand your answer, but I really don't. Again, you say Afghanistan has a functioning government, which seems to be losing ground, but there are ungoverned areas, or there are areas where there's a sympathetic government to terrorists. Yemen, I mean, I just listed them, places. I just wonder if we aren't concentrating all of our firepower on the place that bred September 11th and a lot of blood and treasure, as I said, that I don't know how we're going to change the dynamic there. We had 110,000 troops there. Now we have 15,000. What's going to be different? I was following up, I thought, Senator Warren's questions going back in history where your predecessors have all said we're at a turning point. We don't seem to be, nothing seems to change. And what's going to change in the next 2 years or 3 years? And by the way, I am not questioning your leadership whatsoever. I certainly plan to vote to confirm you. I think you're the right guy in the right job at the right time. Your record is impeccable. I'm talking more about national policy. You happen to be the guy sitting in the witness seat. But what do you see as changing that will change the dynamic? Because it seems to be going in a negative direction in terms of land-controlled, decline in the size of the Afghan security forces, political instability within the government in Afghanistan. How do we make a change in that dynamic?
Senator, as I look through and think back, based on your question, reflect what's changed. Again, I was there in 2001, where we probably had about 1,000 U.S. boots on the ground, maybe even a little less than that, with other coalition partners. I was there in 2009 and 10 when the U.S. military, as well as other NATO forces, surged. We were over 130,000 U.S. forces, and the period where we took the brunt of U.S. casualties as well as NATO casualties. As I came back in 13-14, what had changed then was a Afghan-led effort. Afghan forces to the fore, Afghan forces leading the security charge and wanting to do that. As a matter of fact, their senior leadership wanted to ensure they were in the front. We'll have to go forward and take a look at this if confirmed, but that's another adjustment. You see an even smaller number of U.S. and other coalition forces that are working to train, advise, and assist, both institutionally and tactically. But this is, first and foremost, Afghan-led, except where our national security interests are at risk.
And I understand that. One final question. Is the Taliban our enemy? Is the Taliban, because again, this whole thing is in the context of counterterrorism. Is the Taliban a terrorist organization? Are they more likely to tolerate and support and encourage the resurgence of ISIS or Al-Qaeda as opposed to the government? I'm genuinely interested in the ideology of the Taliban. I can't figure out who they are.
Senator, from my perspective, the Taliban have previously hosted and tolerated Al-Qaeda. They've now said that that would not be part of their future policy, but that's statements by them. I don't have a judgment whether that's true or not. They are the enemy of the Afghan people, and because they're fighting against the Afghans, what they are is they create the disorder and the spaces that now become ungoverned over time.
Well, I really appreciate your thoughtfulness and your willingness to take on this very difficult assignment, and we'll certainly try to provide you with what you tell us you need. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator King. Senator Cotton.
Thank you. General Miller, thank you very much for your willingness to go to Afghanistan once again and for your many years of service. We have many fine flag officers that come in front of this committee, but few have displayed not just the command excellence, but the personal valor and bravery you have on the battlefield. We all appreciate that. Let me continue down Senator King's line of questioning about why Afghanistan. Why are we in Afghanistan 17 years later? Why not all the other places that are deeply troubled and pose threats to us as well, like Syria, for instance, although we do have troops in Syria, but just at the levels and the length of time. It's true that Afghanistan is where we were attacked from on 9/11, is that right?
That's correct, Senator.
Is it still true that Afghanistan and its border area with Pakistan has the highest concentration of foreign terrorist organizations anywhere in the world?
That's correct, Senator.
It's also the case that we have a troop presence that's established and that does many important tasks in Afghanistan, that we would lose that presence and those capabilities in the country if we were to, as you say, precipitously withdraw.
Yes, Senator, that's correct.
But 17 years is a long time. I think this will make, you said your fourth deployment?
I count it in years, about 4 years, Senator.
Okay. Did you imagine in 2001 that you would be deploying for a fourth year to Afghanistan in 2018?
Senator, I did not.
Is that something you really would have wanted to do in 2001?
Yeah, Senator, I actually recall conversations of people who were out over Christmas of 2001 talking about they were doing this, their kids did not have to.
Well, since you raised that, let's talk about Lieutenant Miller there for a second. If Lieutenant Miller does his job well and stays as a platoon leader at the 82nd Airborne into next year, 2019, he is going to have a private report to his platoon, in all likelihood, who was born after the 9/11 attacks. That's a pretty shocking fact, isn't it?
Yes, Senator.
So we've taken on a lot of burden in Afghanistan. We've taken it on for a long time. Many Americans rightfully question why we have spent so much money there, why we've had so many of our sons and daughters killed there. Is the simple answer to those questions that Afghanistan is where they attacked us from, and if we were to, as you say, precipitously withdraw, they would simply try to start attacking us again?
Senator, I go back to that national interest, the vital national interest, which is the security of our country, security of our citizens, as well as other international partners. That's why we're in Afghanistan.
And I wish that you and all those other lieutenants and captains who said in 2001 that they were there so their kids didn't have to be there had that prediction come true, but it's simply not the case. The enemy is still there, and the enemy still gets the vote, right?
That's correct, Senator.
You know, a couple weeks ago, unfortunately, an American soldier was killed. Staff Sergeant Alex Conrad. He was killed in a very poor, troubled, war-torn country. It wasn't Afghanistan, though. It was Somalia. And Captain Miller served in Somalia 25 years ago. Isn't that right?
That's correct, Senator.
Did you have the same sentiment when you served in Somalia, that you wish that you were there in part so your children wouldn't have to be there 25 years later?
Senator, I think in 1993 I wasn't thinking that in that direction, but to your point, yes.
But it's the truth that although not a continuous presence for 25 years, we have had a pretty regular presence in Somalia for many of those 25 years, correct?
No, that's correct, Senator.
And what do Somalia and Afghanistan have in common that has required us to have troops continually present since 2001 in Afghanistan and regularly present in Somalia since 1993?
Senator, it's violent extremist organizations. In this present day, we're speaking about al-Shabaab and ISIS in Somalia.
And we all wish that they weren't there, and we all wish they didn't want to try to kill us in the United States. But they are there, and that's why we have troops there still. And I commend you, and I commend your son, and every other soldier, sailor, airman, and Marine that we have that are continuing to carry on this fight for 17 years in Afghanistan to keep this country safe. It's something that probably none of them want to do. They all wish, like you had wished in 2001, that they weren't having to do it. But as you say, if we precipitously withdraw, then the only thing that's going to happen in Afghanistan is they're going to start plotting to attack us again here in our home. Thank you, and Godspeed in Afghanistan.
Thank you, Senator Cotton. Senator Scott.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. General, thank you for being here this morning, and thank you for coming by my office last week and spending some quality time. I think the time was well spent, and certainly appreciate the time that we focused on your current assignment and how well you've done this, and thank you for your service to our country. I think Senator Cotton, as well as Senator Warren and others, have alluded to the question that I'm going to ask you, that you seem to have the same very succinct answer to it. I want to give you a little more time to kind of unscramble that egg a little bit for us. But 17 years later, we still have more than 12,000 troops still in Afghanistan. There's no question that there seems to be a part of our national security priorities keeping our men and women who've served this nation so bravely and so well still in Afghanistan. So my question to you is, does ISIS, or the Taliban, or Al-Qaeda pose a threat to Americans here at home? And absent our presence in Afghanistan, would you say that the threat to the homeland goes up so significantly that it is worth having those troops in harm's way there to keep us safe here at home? And beyond your yes, can you explain why?
Senator, of those, the three groups you named, Taliban, ISIS, and Al-Qaeda, I would put the Taliban in a separate category, a threat to forces in Afghanistan.
Yes, sir.
And I'd put ISIS and Al-Qaeda in a threat, an external piece. You mentioned we discussed in the context of my current work. I go back to, I know these are transnationalist groups. I know that they communicate external to Afghanistan. They trade tactics, techniques, and procedures. They share them. There's funding. There's media. There's inspiration that is driven out of these two groups. So I see both of them as clear transnational threats with the desire to attack the United States or Western interests.
And without our presence, their desire plus their capabilities would pose a real immediate or imminent threat to the United States.
Yes, Senator, there needs to be pressure on them, military pressure, as well as consolidation, post-military pressure to disrupt and start breaking them down.
Thank you, sir. I'd like to take this opportunity to ask a question pertaining to your current position as commander of the Joint Special Operations Command. The men and women you lead have been instrumental in killing or capturing terrorists on the battlefield who would like nothing better than to attack Americans, as you just suggested, here at home. However, the National Defense Strategy identifies the need to counter near-peer adversaries such as Russia and China. Although it does not specifically say so, one could argue that it means less emphasis on places like Afghanistan. Given the extra resources needed to field the fifth-generation aircraft, the next-generation combat vehicles, and advanced technology weapons, those resources will have to come from somewhere else. Does the National Defense Strategy change how you think about training and employing the forces you command today?
Senator, yes, it does change, but I'll tell you, it changes all the time. The men and women of Joint Special Operations Command, I would call them a full spectrum organization, or SOF writ large is full spectrum. So while concentrating on violent extremist organizations, certainly since 2001, very directly, indirectly in other cases, SOF is also preparing for other challenges, as indicated in the National Defense Strategy. As for the resourcing, certainly what you can expect from me, what my leadership expects from me is best military advice on how the current fight ought to be resourced, and then I expect them to make the decisions based on a broader global look.
Thank you, sir. I think you basically answered my second question, but I'll ask it anyways. Are you concerned at all that the National Defense Strategy will take resources away from the priorities in Afghanistan, and do you have the freedom, the flexibility to ask for the resources that you need once you're on the ground and having a new view? And I think Senator Graham did a really good job of pointing out the fact that you spent about 4 years of your career in Afghanistan, so you have an understanding and appreciation of the terrain and the difficulties and the challenges that we face. But if you need more resources, I hope you'll feel have the flexibility and the freedom to ask for those.
Senator, if confirmed, I'm confident I have the flexibility and freedom to ask for those resources. I know my chain of command will listen to what would come from the ground up. I know they've been listening to General Nicholson over the past 2.5 years as well.
Good enough. Let me just use my closing time that I actually do not have to say thank you for your service. It certainly is good to see your son behind you. It helps me understand and appreciate your sense of urgency as it relates to getting out of places that we do not need to be, but also staying in those places if there's actually no other choice for us other than to be there or risk more lives here at home. Thank you both for your service. God bless.
Thank you, Senator Scott. Senator Sullivan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and General, welcome. I'm just very thankful that you're willing to take on the job. I want to thank your family as well. I think in terms of qualifications, you might be uniquely qualified for this task. We don't get many generals in front of this committee that not only have the experience you have, but Purple Hearts and exceptional awards for valor. So I want to thank you for that. Like I said, I want to thank your family as well. Your JSOC command, I think, particularly is relevant for your next assignment. I certainly plan on supporting you fully. You're seeing the themes here about 17 years and a long time, many turning points, but really not at the turning points. The CT mission is critical. Pakistan is a safe haven. I think there's been a lot of good questions here. I want to ask you maybe to take this opportunity to educate us and the American public who have a lot of interest in this on a couple issues. Right now, you're going to be going into a broader mission that's focused on an advise and assist mission as part of Resolute Support, but also a CT mission. Can you explain the difference and then how these two are related? Because they're different but important.
And Senator, I've talked or heard discussions on CT, counterinsurgency, and the rest, they're absolutely linked. And as part of the CT mission, the Afghans, in some cases, take the lead there as well. So that's also has a train, advise, and assist component. When you look at the larger train, advise, and assist with the other parts of the Afghan National Army and the police in some cases, this is the piece that drives Afghan-led. It is the security forces that extend the writ of the government, if you will. It creates an environment. So the train, advise, and assist is meant to enable those Afghan forces to be successful. From a personal example, I mentioned earlier to the committee, I have not seen the special security forces lose. I have seen them take hits. I've seen them bleed. I've seen them take casualties, but they win their fights. They win their fights. They're even better when they have the right enabling support from us. And that goes, I anticipate that's the same for the entire Afghan National Army.
Can the CT mission be successful without the train, advise, and assist mission? Are they that interrelated? Or can we just say, hey, you know what, we'll just keep JSOC over there and robust CT mission to protect the homeland, but we're going to give up on the TAA mission?
Senator, I've watched CT operations that are largely focused on kinetics, and my personal assessment is those are fleeting. They're disruptive, but not necessarily a decisive or an enduring operation. The TAA, the Afghans coming in behind, that is your reliable partnership that starts driving towards what I'd refer to as a consolidation of gains, which oftentimes are more political than they are military.
Can we ever secure our national interests either from the train, advise, and assist or CT perspective if there is a safe haven in Pakistan?
Senator, safe haven makes this infinitely more difficult.
So is that a no?
We have to squeeze out safe havens if we're going to be successful here.
You know, former four-star Army general who I think you and I both know well, General Abizaid, talked many, many years ago about the long war. And a lot of the themes here really relate to this idea of the long war. We don't want to be there necessarily, but we also don't want to subject our citizens to the risks of a catastrophic attack on the homeland or American citizens. So we need to be forward deployed to be ready to take out these kind of threats. Can you talk a little bit about that, particularly from your JSOC mission? I agree with Senator Scott that we need to look at the JSOC breadth of mission, particularly with regard to the National Defense Strategy, but there are certain areas where that mission is critical. Afghanistan is one because of the violent extremist organizations that have a global reach. Can you talk about and maybe help us understand what General Abizaid talked about, a generational fight that we just need to be ready to deal with to keep our citizens safe? As the JSOC commander, in many ways, you are the leader of that battle and long war focus.
Senator, I actually remember when General Abizaid used to talk about the long war.
Well, we're in it, aren't we?
We absolutely are.
17 years.
And I think we recognize, those that have been in it right now recognize it's been generational. There's been adjustments to it over time. As you look at the threat, Afghanistan's a prime example, and it comes back to the TAA. In years past, the United States would try to lead, do most of the fighting, and what you see now is the adjustment, which I think is broad, which I know is broader than Afghanistan, where enable the local security forces to be able to take care of their problem. And that drives the TAA, knowing that you're not going to be able to sustain Americans or other NATO partners around the world doing unilateral operations. Better if done by local security forces, and that's the approach here.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Sullivan. We would Senator Reid and I would, entertain it if someone has maybe one final question to ask. All right, fine.
One follow-up to that.
Well, I knew you.
So, thank you. I'm here, right? Might as well do it, and it's important. So how should the country think about the idea of the long war? You've been in charge of it. We're overseeing it. There's discomfort here, 17 years in. But do we need to just have a different mindset, the way General Abizaid talked about this 15 years ago?
Senator, if it's helpful, as I work within my organizations and we discuss this, part of this is building the force for the long haul. Are you sustainable? If this is going to be enduring, and I'm not talking specifically Afghanistan here, enduring, how do you posture the force? How do you array the force? How do you get it set to handle the security challenges of the future here? And we have many discussions on that, and a lot of the arrayal of our force is based just on that, as well as our interagency collaboration and cooperation and multinational engagement as well.
Thank you.
Yeah, and General Miller, I think you've sensed from both sides of the aisle, and during the course of this meeting, there is obviously an expectation that you'll bring something in that is going to offer something new. And I think we probably ought to, after you've been on the job for a while, after you're confirmed, to come in and give some new insights. Because to continue to do the same thing that's led us into 17 years is not going to be acceptable. And again, I would repeat what some others have said, that I think you are the right person, you have the right background, so we'll expect a major change from you. We thank you very much for this.
Thank you, sir.
All right, we're adjourned.